Cheers and welcome to Irondale Brewing. I have two beers before me, and these are the Flash Brewing beers from More Beer. On your right, my left, we have the Citra Session Pale Ale, and on your left, my right, we have the IPA kit. So these Flash Brewing kits, just real quick summary, I'll link to my other two videos about them. Basically, it's just malt powder or dry malt extract, yeast, hops. You throw them in the fermenter, no boil, no cooking, no nothing. And then you do normal fermentation process. So finally got to a point where I haven't done tasting on these. They've been done for a while, and getting the kegerator is crowded. So I got to get these beers out of here. I actually canned a bunch of this one. I will probably do the same with that one. I'll have some videos about canning. So I'm just rubbing off some of the condensation here. But I mean, long and short of it is both of these beers turned out really well. The Citra Session Pale Ale, I was as nice to it as I could be. You dump stuff in the fermenter, but then I had fermentation temperature control in my fermentation chamber. I did closed transfer the whole way to avoid oxygenation. To avoid oxygen getting into the beer, we'll say that. It's been a long day at work. My brain's not quite firing on all cylinders. So treated this one like I would a normal beer, other than the fact that you don't have to cook anything. You just dump it in fermenter and go. The IPA, which is their version of Bell's Two Hearted, which is a beer I know well, love it. This one I was not nice to. I dumped it in the fermenter. I left it in my brewing space, which does have a mini split set to auto 68. This time of year in the Pacific Northwest, that means it's swinging between hot and cold, or heating and cooling on the mini split. So the temperature in here, I did take a graph. Somebody in the Homebrew Talk forum suggested, hey, why don't you keep tabs on what's going on inside the fermenter with I used an ice spindle in this case. I thought that was a great idea. So I went ahead and did that, and I'll put that up probably over my face so you can see the whole thing. And it was interesting to see because the temperature, it stayed relatively steady in this space, did get kind of cold at times, but when the yeast was at its most active, it shot up to, I don't remember, 78 or something like that. Like I said, I'll put the chart up. So it was interesting to see how that, what the behavior was. As far as the results, I mean, you can see these are both good-looking beers. When you consider the fact, to me, the Citra is paler and clearer. This one is, actually, they're both equally clear. This one's just a little bright copper, more that side of things, and this one is a little bit more pale. But when you consider I started with a bucket of goo, basically, and this is what you wind up with for 10 minutes of work on the brewing side of things, I don't know that you can complain. I was honestly surprised. I got both these kits. I'm like, I'm going to give them a shot and see how they turn out. And I did not have high expectations, but I'm very pleased with the results. And I'll talk about kind of like where I see this fitting in to the overall brewing picture kind of towards the end. I want to get these beers tasted before they sit here too long. But as you can see, they both good head retention. I did nothing special other than dump the kit in the fermenter. Like I said, this one treated a little bit nicer than this one. But I'll start with the Citra. And this has been in the keg for probably a month at least. But yeah, still really great Citra on the nose. I will say, well, I'll talk about that in a second here, kind of like the timing of how long you want to wait to let the beers age, mature, or whatever, before you taste them. But yeah, still has really good Citra character on the nose. I did take some of this to a party a couple of weeks ago, and everybody really loved it. And yeah, that's just a really nice, fairly, I think it's low ABV, maybe 4.5%, 5%, something like that. But it's a really easy drinking, very citrusy, because of the Citra hops, obviously. Just a nice pale ale, no complaints. It's not, I do have a can of a Citra pale ale that's from a local brewery around here. I didn't want to overwhelm the beer setup here, but it's not the best citrus or Citra hopped pale ale I've ever had, but it is darn good, and I have had way worse beers than this one for sure. So Yeah, I mean, really good mouthfeel, no off flavors whatsoever, no complaints. I will say this one, I tried it after a week in the conditioning in the kegerator. It was super, super orange juicy and had a very sweet aftertaste to it. And I was like, well, even at that point, it was like, it's not terrible, not my favorite. I let it sit another week and that mellowed out quite a lot. And it turned out to be a really nice beer. So this one is the I Heart IPA, which I should have looked this up ahead of time. We'll just keep rolling. Bear with me. It has been a while since I've said, yeah, I know I Heart IPA. I drink it all the time, which I do, but I cannot for the life of me at the moment remember what kind of, Bell's Two Hearted, what kind of hops. I want to say it's Centennial. Yes, 100% Centennial. Should have gone with my gut. So this one is meant to kind of evoke that. And again, same thing. I thought about having a Bell's Two Hearted out here and comparing. It's like, I didn't want to get too crazy. But similar, you can see it, that is a good looking beer. And the keg has a filter on it. So that's the only point at which it's being filtered is, especially this one, I just siphoned it into the keg. I didn't even, no close transfer, no nothing. But yeah, really nice hop aroma on this one. Again, no complaints, no weird smells. And the flavor on this one is also excellent. It's a lot hoppier than this one, obviously, and different kind of hop character with the Centennial versus the Citra. But, if you like IPAs, I think you would like this beer. Now, this one, I will say, was less successful than the Citra Session Pale Ale. This one, and again, I didn't treat it as nicely, so it'd be interesting to do it again and do temperature control and close transfer and the whole thing and see if it's better or if it comes out about the same. It is not skunked. I should say I didn't cover it at all, so this was exposed to light in the brewery. It was right next to a window that had a shade pulled, so not like I didn't leave it out in the sun or anything, but it's, it was, I didn't put a t-shirt over it or anything, not skunked. And that's one of the things that they say with the hop products that you use for these, you don't need to worry about skunking. They even, I think in the kits that they sell or in the videos, they show you bottling in clear bottles. You just don't need to worry about it with the products that they use to build these kits. So yeah, this one, it doesn't work quite as well. I think it's a little bit, trying to think of the easiest way to say this. It's just a little bit out of balance for me, I guess is the best way to say it. Great hop bitterness, but it doesn't quite have the same fullness in the body and backbone that the real Bell's Two Hearted does, but not a bad beer at all. And again, we consider this is the one I did a video and I put a timer on it. It took me 9 minutes to make this beer. And again, even with this one, I've had way worse beers than this one. The other thing about this one, so I tried this after a week in the keg and not skunked at all, but it did have a burnt rubber aroma and taste to it. And I'm assuming that was sulfites. The way you can get kind of that element going in beer is it's either sulfites, could even be from the hops, but autolysis, when the yeast dies and bursts, can release, because the sulfur dioxide, I think, is the compound. That's a normal part of the yeast metabolism. But when the yeast dies and ruptures, that can, introduce that in your beer. It can also be caused by too high fermentation temperatures, which I don't think was the case. I think the hottest it got, well, inside the fermenter, it did get pretty high when the yeast was at its most active, but that was for like a day. So I don't think that's probably the reason. And it can also be from, old hops, old yeast, that kind of stuff. I'm assuming it was just too young when I first tried it. And so that was pretty strong. And I'm like, this may have gone bad because of me not controlling the temperature better. But it turns out, I just needed to give it another week, and then it mellowed out quite a bit. And you don't detect that at all at this point. I'll double check though. Definitely not in the flavor. Yeah, it just smells like Centennial hops. Yeah, so again, another nice beer. I did videos on both of these, and but just if you haven't watched those, basically it uses hop bite, they call it, which is just a hop liquid that you squirt into the beer. That's just the generic bittering hop, because again, you're not boiling, so there's no boil hops to bitter it. And then also cryo hops. So this had Citra cryo hops. This had Centennial cryo hops, but you just throw it all in there all at once and let it do its thing. So, like I said, I had low expectations. These are both really good. I prefer the Citra. There is the concept that I think I first heard from the Sapwood Cellars guy. God, brain is drawing a blank on the guy's name who wrote the latest book on kind of hop science. I may think of it here in a second. But anyway, he's part of Sapwood Cellars, and they have the concept of cheater hops. And in a video of theirs I was watching, it's like, well, the beer can be not that great, but if you're using like Citra or Simcoe or Mosaic or some of these hops, you can get away with a lot because it's just like, this is a good beer because of the hops. That's not a bad route to go with this stuff. Like I said, I think this one is still good, less successful than this one. But they're both good beers, 10 minutes of work. You still have to, wait the 2 weeks to ferment, or they say, 10 days. I gave them both a full 2 weeks. And you can't really track the gravity. I probably should put that chart up from the ice spindle too. The gravity readings are completely wacko because they're in, when you first dump the malt powder in there, it's just kind of sitting on top, clumpy. So there's no way that would be accurate, but hopefully the temperature was accurate enough to be of interest. But yeah, I think this is an interesting approach to making it much faster on the brewing side of, brewing in quotes, I guess, depending on how much of a purist you are, on the brewing side of beer. As far as where I think this fits in, I will also put a link to, there's a podcast with Brad Smith from Beer Smith, who talked to, always forget his name, President of More Beer, about these kits. And he kind of, he goes over what their target audience is and what the intent with these kits is. So I'm not going to rehash all that. To me, I think probably the biggest thing, because I do all grain and extract. If you do all grain brew in a bag, I don't think you can really argue, this is just my opinion based on my experience over the last, year or so of getting more heavily back into brewing. I don't think you can argue that extract saves you a whole lot of time. Maybe you could argue less equipment, but if you're doing a 5-gallon batch of extract, you kind of wind up in the same place. And to me, it's like the time is still there, especially if you're going to, do specialty grains, that's your mash. The total time elapsed and cleanup and all that of extract versus brew in a bag, I think they're pretty equivalent. To me, at least for me, what I do extract for is if I want to eliminate as many variables as possible. I just want to make a basic beer and experiment with something, right? That to me is the benefit of extract, because I don't have to worry about the mashing process and all that can, potentially go wrong there, because that's taken care of for me. I can just focus on, I'm going to make this beer and throw this ingredient in it and see what happens, see how it works. That's one use I can potentially see for these kits is I just want to make a generic beer, and what happens if you throw, something in this Citra Pale Ale, or what happens if you, add raspberry to this Centennial IPA. That way you're first of all, it eliminates a ton of time, because this way, if you aren't doing the traditional extract brewing, you've wiped out all of the brew day, and you can just focus on, I'm just going to throw these ingredients in this fermenter, and I want to see what happens with this addition or something like that. I can see that being an interesting use of this stuff. The other thing, and this is probably the biggest use that the More Beer folks talk about, is my schedule is packed. I'm going camping. I'm doing something coming up, and I want to bring some beer with me, but I do not have time to squeeze a brew day in there. You can, all you need, as long as you have the time to wait for the fermentation process to finish and have time to package it, the brew day is gone. It's literally just clean your fermenter, throw the stuff in there, and you will get, if these two are any indication, a pretty decent beer out of it. The More Beer folks did submit this, I think it was this Citra Session Pale Ale, to a homebrew competition, and it scored a 34, that's a solid score. That's this beer is pretty good. It's not, best of show, but it's not the courtesy score of, we're going to give you an 18 or a 20 just to be nice, because it's garbage. That's, 34 is pretty respectable. And I think the guy, apologize, can't remember his name, but for More Beer, entered an all grain batch that he did, and it scored lower than this. Different type of beer, different, whatever. There's a million variables there, just saying. So yeah, I think, I'm not going to belabor this too much, but if you're interested, and it kind of caught your eye and like, that seems interesting to me, I would highly encourage you to try it. The kits are 40 or $50. They have other varieties. They have a wheat beer. I can't remember the others, but I'll put a link to the More Beer page on all this stuff. And I was pleasantly surprised. In fact, I was a little bit shocked because my expectations were so low. And I would say if I'm looking to do something, or say, for example, it's like, oh, I want to brew beer, but I don't, have grains, wait on grains. I got some extract around, blah, 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 whatever. I would probably go this route versus traditional extract way of brewing with a mini mash or whatever, just because it's so much quicker. They figured out a way to eliminate most of the process on the time-intensive brew day side of things, and you get a pretty decent result. Again, is this going to be better than the best craft session, Citra Session Pale Ale? No, but it stands up pretty well. And like I said, take both of these beers. In fact, I had a way worse beer than either of these 2 nights ago. That was from a craft brewery, and like, it was just, I don't know if there was something wrong with it. To me, it felt like the recipe was just super, super heavy on the crystal malt. Just my assessment based on drinking it. And so these are both solid beers. So I think I'll just stop there. I wanted to share my experience with this stuff. I will definitely be doing these again. It's kind of a handy thing, just have one of these kits around. And if you're, the other example they gave that I agree with is if you're brewing anyway and you're doing an all grain batch and you have an extra fermenter, like, just throw this in a fermenter. You get two batches out of the brew day, which is not a bad thing. So that's kind of my take on flash brewing. Sorry, one more thing I will say is, if you want to put some fun back in the brewing, if you've kind of been on a slog of doing all grain batches, and I had a Brewzilla malfunction recently that kind of knocked my morale back a little bit. This is a fun thing to do. Just get it and do it, and it's fun. And sometimes you just need to do that. I read an article from an old edition of Zymergy magazine that said basically the same thing. This was, I can't remember who wrote it, but well-known home brewer, and was just like, I do extract batches every once in a while just because it brings the fun back. So if you're looking to do that, or if you're in kind of a point in your brewing cycle where it feels like a bit of a slog, 10 minutes for a very darn drinkable beer that everybody, all your friends will probably love too, is a good way to kind of get that morale boost that you may need. So I'll end there. Cheers. I will cheers myself. And I'm not probably going to drink both of these because it's school night, but one or the other is going to be finished. So see you in the next one for more strawberry beer tastings.